Hi, my name is Katie, and I am the driver for the session, and I'm here with. Okay, let me just put my mic in. Okay, so that's is chapter 15, part 2, where we are automating database actions with triggers. So I'm going to explain triggers and I will move to the query. So, what are triggers in detail? Triggers, triggers are automated database procedures that respond to specific events on a table or a view. So think of them as invisible assistants that quietly monitor your data and take action when something changes. So when do triggers fire? Triggers respond to three main types of events: the event type and mirror description. So the insert fires when a new row is added to a table, useful for auto-filling fields, validating data, or logging entries. The update fires when an existing row is modified, ideal for tracking changes, enforcing business rules, or syncing data. And then we have the delete. So it fires when a row is removed, often for archiving, logging deletions, or preventing accidental data loss. Now we have trigger timing options, so you can control when the trigger runs relative to the event. So we have our timing and our behavior. So the before runs before the database executes the events, great for modifying or validating data before it's saved, and then we have the after. So this runs after the event completes, ideal for logging notifications or cascading updates. And then we have the instead. So that replaces the event entirely, commonly used for views with direct insert, update, or delete isn't allowed. Okay, so for example, we have an example over here. A before insert triggers might autofill a created at timestamp, and after update trigger might log the old and new values of change fields. And instead of delete triggers on a view might archive data instead of removing it. Sorry. And then we have the row, le row level versus the statement level triggers. The triggers can fire once per row or once per statement. So we have the scope and the description. So for each row, execute the trigger function for every row affected by the event, essential when you need detailed row specific logic. And then for each this statement, yes, each statement, execute one per SQL statement regardless of how many rows are affected, useful for summary actions or batch logging. Here we have an example, updating 100 rows with a for each row trigger. Will run the function 100 times, and the same update for each statement triggers will run the function just once. So what is inside a trigger? A trigger consists of trigger function, a PG-SQL function that defines what to do, a trigger definition, the SQL statement that attaches the function to a table and event. Triggers uses special variables, so the new, the row after the change used in the insert and the update, the old, the row before the change used in update and delete. So why do we use triggers? Triggers help automate enforced rules without relying on application logic. They're perfect for auditing. Just get my mouse. To track what changed and when. And then we have the validation. Um, block invalid data before it's saved. And then we have the automation. Fill in fields, sync tables, or send alerts. And then we have the security to prevent unauthorized changes or deletions. Okay, So now that we've covered what a trigger is, um, I'm gonna move to the query. Okay. So here we are creating a um the main grades table to store students' grades. Here we have the unique ID for each student, the unique ID for each course, the course name, the grade received, and the computer key, one grade per student per course. In here we're just inserting the grade data for one student across 4 courses. And then moving on, we are creating a history table to log the grade changes with timestamps. So here we have the student ID, the course ID, when the grade was changed, course name, grade before change, grade after the change, allows multiple changes per course. So here we are creating a trigger function to log grade changes only if the grade actually changed. So yeah, this will only log the change if the grade was actually modified. And here we have the current timestamp, and here we continue with the update. And then over here, we are creating a trigger that fires after any grade update and runs the logging function. So for each now, the trigger runs for updated rows. And then here, we check the history table and it should be empty before any updates. So let's just run that. Um, and then here we can view the current grades, as we can see over there. So next we are updating a grade to trigger the logging mechanism. And then over here set grade we have a change biology to grade from F to C. And then here we're creating a user table to simulate the login activity. I just want to see something. 7 minutes. Okay. So the unique user ID, the username, and the password. And then over here, obviously, we just inserting the data. And then here we're creating a login table to track the login attempts with the timestamps, the user who logged in, the timestamp of a um login. And then here we just have the option to view all the users, as we can see over there. Um, so here we're creating a function to log in attempt simulated via password update. And then here the login, here where we log the user ID in the current time into the login log. And the return new just to continue with the password update. And then lastly, we're creating a trigger that login attempts after a password update. So this just simulates the login event by treating password changes as logins. So here after update of password, this just triggers only fires password changes. And then over here we simulate the login by updating the user's password. And then over here, as we can see, pass7, this just changes Linda's password to simulate the login. And here we can view the login to confirm that the trigger works. And that is it for chapter 15 part 2. Thank you for watching.